Hello, welcome to The Shift. I'm Stacy Johnson, and I am so glad that you are here today. I am here to talk about the power of self-love today. So I'm going to share my screen with you so that we can get into this training. Again, welcome. I am Stacy Johnson, and the last few days I have come to you with different trainings. And I am a clinical therapist. I've been a therapist for 25 years. I'm a woman empowerment coach and a resilience mentor. I help selfless women, caretakers, conquer life storms, regulate their emotions and nervous system, break free from overthinking so they can make confident decisions and be more productive in their personal and professional life. So I am glad that you are here today. If you have joined me the last few days, if you have not, it is fine, because the nice thing about having this shift on YouTube is that the replays will be there forever. So you can go back and watch any of the other trainings. So just to recap real quick is that the first training was on overthinking, and overthinking keeps us stuck. Our second day was on self-care, and self-care helps regulate our emotions. And today we're going to focus on self-love. And it's the glue that holds us all together. It allows you to care for yourself without guilt and break free from the stress and overthinking cycle. So in the comments, when was the last time you spoke to yourself with kindness? Drop it into the comment. So my goal in this training is to help you understand that self-love is not just a mindset. It's a practice that directly impacts emotional regulation, self-care, and overthinking. So I'm bringing this all together, what we've talked about. So what is self-love? Self-love is the foundation that empowers us to reach our full potential, infused with compassion, grace, and gentleness. It is treating ourselves with the same kindness and care and respect that you show others. It's like, what would you say to your best friend is how you treat yourself. And it's extending that forgiveness, even when we struggle or make mistakes. Self-love is not selfish, and it's not about being perfect. It is not just about self-care, but how we talk and treat to ourselves every day. So why is self-love such a struggle for so many women? Women are wired to be nurturing. This goes back to our hunting and gathering times. If you think about, those times, the women made sure the home was a safe place to come back to. They did all the cooking. So they were taking care of everybody. And that is what happens still today because it's ingrained in us. We often find ourselves taking care of our children, our partner, maybe we're even our parents. We're the sandwich generation. We are, maybe taking care of aging parents, and we also have children that we're taking care of. So we're that sandwich generation. We may even help take care of friends. We extend grace to everyone, but don't leave time for ourselves. And maybe this theory that we have to take care of someone else, obviously this is part of our women, ingrained nurture, but it also comes from, this family belief or society belief that we're selfish if we don't take care of others. We get these internal messages or these negative self-talk, or you can call them the pesty self-talk, whatever you want to call it, but those get ingrained in us too from an early on. They can get ingrained to us from childhood, society, maybe even trauma. But the negative self-talk leads to self-doubt. And self common negatives, and these messages, again, are getting ingrained to us. So this belief that we have to take care of everybody else, or this belief that we are selfish if we care about ourselves before we care for others, is part of those negative self-talk. Other messages that can come along with this negative self-talk is that I'm not good enough. I should be doing more. I'm not worthy. I'll never get it right. So put in the comments if you find yourself having any of this negative self-talk come along for you. Lack of self-love, when we ignore our own needs and we don't put ourselves first, or we ignore, don't use self-love, we're more likely to become resentful and frustrated. I know that's what I felt about 10 or 15 years ago. I was taking care of I was the CEO, like I talked about this in my first training. I was the CEO manager of our household. So I was taking care of everybody. And if I sat down to rest, no one said anything. It wasn't like my husband who was sitting on the couch watching a movie. If, he wasn't the one that said, make sure you clean the house. It was my own internal message that said, I can't sit or rest. I must clean the house, or I need to go do this. So I started to feel frustrated that, everybody else may have had this time to rest, but I didn't. But no one else was putting that pressure on me. It was my own self. And this resentment and frustration, and we just get lost in our own self. Like we just get lost and we, feel exhausted. We don't have that sense of self anymore, and we lose that that part of ourself. And like I said, we get exhausted. And doing all this stuff can also lead to destructive patterns, such as, scrolling endlessly on social media, or maybe even alcoholism. I've seen women that run on an empty self-love tank. And that's when all those destructive patterns can come involved. Or self-love, the lack of self-love gets disguised as perfectionism. And I'm going to talk now about this perfectionism idea versus self-love. And we're going to, compare the two. Perfectionism often seems like this pursuit of excellence, fear of not being enough. There's that negative self-talk. When we lack self-love, we don't believe we are enough. And perfectionism says, if I do everything flawlessly, I'll be worthy enough. But true self-love allows room for mistakes. Perfectionism says, I can't fail. If I do, I'm a failure. Lack of self-love says, I am only as good as my achievements. But true self-love embraces mistakes as learning opportunities. Perfectionism says, I need approval to feel good about myself. Lack of self-love says, my worth depends on what others think. True self-love comes from internal validation, not everybody else's opinions. Perfectionism says, I won't try unless I know I'll succeed. Lack of self-love says, I don't trust myself to handle failure. But true self-love allows space for growth and learning without fear. Perfectionism says, I must keep going, even if I'm exhausted. Lack of self-love says, rest means I'm lazy, or I'm not doing enough. True self-love respects that you need rest. Perfectionism keeps you trapped in that self-doubt. Learning to have growth mindset can also help with this changing this idea from this perfectionism ideas and this lack of self-love versus, truly finding your true love, true self-love with growth mindset. Growth mindset says that, we look at mistakes as opportunities for learning and changing, not that it was that you failed at something. And I don't have enough time to go into the training for growth mindset at this time as well. But that is inside my Anchor Resilience program. I do a whole bunch of different techniques and different ideas to have you shift from this managing emotions to this resilience. So, what are some of the problems that we face when we ignore our self-love? Lack of self-love keeps you seeking validation from others instead of trusting yourself. And this will fuel self-doubt, second guessing, and then hence overthinking. Without self-love, we're more reactive to stress and external opinions and criticism, which leads to irritation and burnout. When you don't love yourself enough, self-care feels like a chore. It feels like something you don't deserve. You keep pushing past your limits, feeling guilty for resting. This is exactly where I was, like 15 years ago. Self-love allows you to say no and set boundaries. But without it, you keep overextending yourself, over apologizing, and overworking. So self-love, we learn how to say no and not feel guilty about doing it. Without self-love, it's hard to accept love from others. And this creates that pattern of self-sacrifice, resentment, or emotional detachment. So let's talk about the missing link between overthinking and emotional regulation. And that is self-love. Self-love isn't just about feeling good. It's about creating emotional stability. When we lack self-love, our emotions control us instead of us controlling them. And this is when we can fall into the loop of overthinking. We start to react and we feel overwhelmed because we haven't built the foundations to manage stress in a healthy way. And this is one reason why I decided to talk about these three components, because they all link together. And so I thought it was very important to talk about the overthinking, self-care, and self-love. So let's talk about this cycle a little closer. So when we have self-love is missing, this is what it can look like. We have trigger, and this is when something happens. Something brings on a little bit of stress. Maybe it was you have a deadline at work, or you're approaching some kind of deadline, or maybe you've had a disagreement with someone, and the overthinking starts. Because remember, when we talked about in the overthinking training, that overthinking will start because our brain is meant to problem solve. But if we can't solve a problem, it will get into this loop. Now think about, the trigger. It has to be, it's never going to be something that's enjoyable. You never overthink things that bring you joy. They'll be in your memories. If someone says, hey, what do we do on that vacation? You can recall that memory, but it's not like you overthink it. Overthinking is that loop trying to solve the problem that is being caused by this trigger. So now your overthinking is happening. And then we go into emotional overload. And this is when our nervous system gets, we get activated. That state of stress, gets heightened, and we get in that fight or flight mode. And our nervous system gets dysregulated. And when our nervous system gets dysregulated, we continue this cycle. And that's when maybe our negative self-talk comes in play. And we start having self-doubt. We start second-guessing ourselves. We start feeling unworthy or that we're incapable. And then self-care is ignored. Maybe our boundaries are ignored. And because we're too busy dealing with all the stuff on the top. And so then we get shut down. We emotionally shut down. We feel drained, disconnected, and even more overwhelmed. So that trigger now that brought on this little stress has now seems even bigger than what it was. So put in the comments if you relate to this cycle. So instead of being controlled by our emotions, self-love allows us to respond instead of reacting to our emotions. So when we use self-love, we need to pause when we're stressed, treat ourselves with compassion instead of allowing our negative self-talk and criticism to get in play. We listen to our body and our needs instead of pushing through exhaustion. We set boundaries without feeling guilty. And we use growth mindset to accept imperfection and move forward instead of fearing our mistakes. And again, all of this is linked together, and I go in more depth inside the anchor resilience, especially the depth of changing those negative self-talk. I use science-backed techniques to help change those negative self-talk and change your mindset so that you have that growth mindset. So if this is something that's interesting you know, all of my contact information is in the description of this training. So we're going to discuss a technique today, and it's combining all the three things that we've learned. It's called the heart anchor technique. And this is just one technique that can help build that resilience roadmap. Now, resilience is definitely what we want for everyone to have. You know, when I'm going to be honest, 3.5 years ago, I lost my husband unexpectedly. And I did not realize that I had this resilience roadmap created already. But after he passed away, I doubled down on all the techniques that I use inside my Anchor Resilience program. And I realized that I was pretty resilient. I had this roadmap already created, and I was able to access it and get through that very life-altering event, you know. And 6 months later, when my youngest daughter was getting ready to leave for college, she says, "Mom, thank you. Thank you so much for helping or modeling how to handle life-altering events, but just stress in general. Because, you know, Mom, you could have easily called off sick more often and isolated in your bedroom. You could have ignored me and her sister." And she says, "And you also could have gotten involved in those those dangerous coping skills that we talked about, like drinking." She says, I've seen other people do all those things, and I'm so thankful that you didn't." So that's what the resilience roadmap is. It's building this way for you to face stress without getting into all that overthinking, without your negative self-talk getting in control. And it is about modeling for your children or grandchildren. So we're shifting you. We want to shift from this overwhelmed to this individual that can handle stress and be more productive in your life and just in, your personal and professional life. So I'm going to teach you one technique today, but there are other techniques like anchor awareness, which looks at reinforcing your inner stability. I have a lighthouse check-in and a self-love compass, which looks at boundaries and self-respect. And all those are inside my Anchor Resilience program. But today I'm going to share with you this heart anchor technique. So this would be used when you maybe find yourself feeling a little stressed or maybe frustrated. It's those uncomfortable feelings. So when you feel that, that's that trigger. I want you to pause. Place your hand on your heart. Take a deep breath. And you're going to identify that feeling that you're feeling. And then reassure yourself. Speak to yourself like you would a friend. I'm safe. I'm learning. I'll be okay. And then anchor it. Take one small self-care action, maybe a little stretch. Take a little break. Maybe if it was a disagreement with someone, maybe you'll take a little break away from that situation. Whatever it is, you'll take that little break. So this reduces stress. It replaces self-criticism with self-compassion, and it indicates to your brain that you are safe. So I encourage you to try this technique either later today if you feel a little stress or a little uncomfortable feeling is a trigger for you, or anytime in the near future. I want you to try this technique. And I would love for you to come back to this training, and in the comments, let me know how it worked for you. So also included inside the Anchor Resilience program is a self-love checklist. And we go over this to discuss the areas that you're struggling at with self-love and growth mindset. And then we create your individualized plan that becomes a part of your resilience roadmap. All of us have different resilience roadmaps. They may have some of the similar techniques, but it's individualized to you. So now some of you might be ready for the Anchor Resilience program, and that is great. I would love to have you because it's packed with tons of information that's going to help shift you from being overwhelmed to this, productive individual. But some of you might not be ready, and that is okay. I'm totally fine with that. And that's why I decided that once I was putting this training together, I decided that what else could there be? There could be more, and that might be where you are. And I've created a 30-day experience. It's an emotional experience. It starts April 10th, and it's for 30 days. And you're going to get daily prompts and emotional regulation exercises inside a Telegram group. You will be able to access that with my personal link. And so I will give you daily prompts through that. And you can engage with the other members through that Telegram as well. And then also we're going to meet once a week for a group coaching. And that way we can discuss any of the struggles you might be having and, just go through some more. And I will be providing some, meditations and those coaching calls. And so the link is in the description for you if you are interested in this emotional experience adventure. So I want to thank you for joining me and in all these trainings. And again, if today was your first training and you would like to see the other two, they're in this channel, The Shift. And if you are interested in more trainings similar to the one that I provided during this shift, then you can follow and subscribe to my YouTube channel at Surviving Shock, which is at YouTube at Stacy Johnson Coaching. And again, thank you for joining us. It was my pleasure to bring all this information to you, and I look forward to seeing you again. All right. Bye bye.